Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Parlay Revival. So we have a pretty action-packed episode for you this week as we cut the rudders open and plan to refill them with foam. But we also take you inside our fuel tanks to see how bad our diesel bug situation really is. But as we dive into that, we find an even worse problem than the diesel bug itself.
I don't even know how it's not leaking yet.
But anyway, because we had blisters under the boat, we had ground off all the anti-foul and found that both rudders had water inside of them with the moisture meter. So it was time to open them up. But if it hadn't been for the blisters, we would have never known about the moisture in there, because there weren't actually any blisters on the rudders themselves. Anyway, to do this fix properly, I took the whole side off the rudder.
So I took the side of the rudder off yesterday, and if you're only just joining us, we have found water between the foam and the glass on both sides. So the easiest way to get at it is just to cut the side off, rip all the foam out, and we're going to put a dehumidifier on this and that engine room section there just to make sure it's all really dry, and then we will fill it up with foam using a board here, and then rip the board off and then glass it with epoxy. So it's going to be really strong. We're still, even in the trailing edge here, we're still picking up water because there's a little bit of foam in there. So I'm just going to dig out all of this foam on the forward side as well and let it dry out. So this looks like an absolute nightmare, but it's not too bad. We'll put 2 holes in the top here and just pour liquid expansion foam in there, polyurethane stuff, and it'll cure really hard like that and be stronger than original because we're using epoxy. You can even see in the leading edge of the rudder there's a gap between the glass and the foam, so that's where most of the water was, in this top area here. So it's delaminated the glass from the foam, so not a lot of strength happening in there. You can see the gap. This is getting into that territory where we're doing way more than we really need to be doing. We're just trying to do it properly once and for all, but this would have lasted another 10 years or something. It was just a slight layer of moisture between the glass and the foam, but you know, it's just hard to throw it back in the water when you are picking up moisture inside the rudder. So we're just doing the hard yards a little bit here. It's just all about peace of mind and trying to do things properly.
So you might be confused as to why I'm taking all of the foam out. Well, the other side of the rudder had water in it as well, but instead of grinding all the fiberglass off that side, I decided to remove the foam core instead, so that we would have to do minimal work on the other side of the rudder. Once the rudder was filled with foam again, we would be able to shape the foam from this side only, then fiberglass over the foam. There are lots of different ways to approach this though. One way being to keep the foam intact and remove both sides of the rudder, but I felt that keeping one wall intact was the better way to go here. You'll also notice that the rudder stock is made completely from fiberglass instead of stainless steel, and therefore doesn't need any frames or webbing inside the rudder for reinforcement, as it would be hard for the shaft to turn inside the rudder if it's glass on glass. Anyway, remember last week when we glassed down the whole port side of the boat in one take? Well, we didn't do this side of the sugar scoop because it wouldn't have been a good camera angle, but after a quick grind, it's now time to finish it off. This was the very last bit of fiberglassing that we had to do on the port hull, apart from the rudder of course, so it was a little milestone that we were pretty happy to reach. Okay, so we just got that done and a few pieces on the keel. That leaves us with only one more spot to glass, and that's on the engine room on the starboard side that we showed you guys. We're sort of jumping around all over the place a little bit so that people always have something to do. So someone can, once this kicks, someone can start grinding that. The parts that we glassed yesterday, they've been ground, so we can start filling that with the epoxy fairing. For the fairing below the waterline, we used micro balloons and some silica mixed in with it, and spread a thin layer over our entire repair so that we could get the perfect shape of the hull back to original. It's a pretty rewarding part of the process, because your focus goes from grinding and fiberglassing to sanding and reshaping the hulls, but the amount of work left to do is always very deceiving. It may look like the hulls only need a little bit of a sand to get back to their original shape, but working overhead with power tools is absolutely exhausting, and just when you think you might be getting close, You have to add another layer of fairing and start the sanding process all over again. Boat projects can sometimes get the better of you, and for our friends a few boats down on the hard stand, it all got a little bit too much.
I was just doing some editing and I looked out the window over there, and the travel lift's here to carry away one of our neighbor's boats. And so this boat was a project boat that they had bought. And I guess it just didn't work out for them. And they've been selling every little thing off this boat. And I think one thing I've realized truly in this shipyard is that it doesn't work out for some people, you know, buying a boat and fixing it up and doing this whole thing, and their stories don't get shared. So yeah, I feel very lucky that Colin's an engineer and Jamie knows what he's doing as well with the boat, because for a lot of people, you know, it's just too big of a project. And it's very eye-opening.
Yep, after 2 years of working on their boat full time, our friends Giulio and Marcello made the devastating decision to sell everything on the boat and scrap the hull for pennies on the dollar. The steel boat was damaged far worse than they could have ever imagined, and sadly, they finally said enough was enough. Out of respect, I didn't film the boat being taken away or anything like that, but it was cut up on the beach and taken to the scrapyard. Some would argue that we were getting close to that point when our main bulkheads broke on the boat.
Oh.
But not me, I'm far too stubborn for that.
Okay guys, excuse the noise. We're in a shipyard, people are grinding them on the hull. But in real time, we just went live to our patrons and we opened up this tank. Chosen One was in there moderating the whole chat group. But now we're just gonna have to do something with this tank, because this is our cabin and it's pretty fumey in here. So now that it's open, we need to seal it back up. So we're going to carry on with this today, Chosen and I. So we opened the tank and we thought we had drained everything out of the tank because fuel stopped pumping out of the pickup. But now that we opened it, we realize that there's this much fuel in the bottom and we want to get that out. So I might blow back down the fuel line here and start pumping it out. So how we're going to get rid of this diesel bug is we're going to first get all the fuel out, and then we've got a wet vac, like a shop vac set up. We're going to vacuum up all of the sludge, and then we're going to spray the walls and everything with biocide and diesel mixed, but a really strong mix of it. And then we'll flush that through, maybe do that twice, and then this tank should be good to go. If you watched a few episodes ago, I started assembling the fuel transfer system that I designed. So one of the interesting things about this pump out now will be to see how much fuel is actually left in the tank, because the pickup is slightly off the bottom. So if there's a whole lot of fuel left over, I might want to think about trying to get the pickup a little bit lower, because water's going to sit below the fuel. So there's not a lot of point in polishing the fuel if you can't get that water off the bottom. But we'll have to see about that. Let's get testing. I'm just going to use the engine 12 volts to just run this pump as a test, running it through the ray core. The reason we thought this tank was empty was because, could have been because we picked up a bit of sludge and the flow stopped, but we had no way of really checking inside the tank. It said 0 on the fuel gauge, but that's because there's hardly any fuel in it, but there is fuel in it. So we'll have to unblock that fuel line, pump the fuel out, and get cleaning the tank. Brand new brake oil filter in there. We're gonna prime it first into this little bucket next to me that Chose is holding. Let's see what we got. That's Derek, marina manager's coming on next to us. We got all of the fuel out of this tank that the fuel system could get out, and we've just come down here and we can see a lot of sludge in the bottom of the tank. But what I was saying before about trying to get the pickup lower, I don't think we want to go any lower. There's only about that much fuel in the bottom of the tank. So we're going to use the extraction pump now and get the last little bit of fuel out, and then it'll be all up to the vacuum. So each one of those rings on the extractor is a litre, so we just got out about 3.5 litres of diesel with the old extraction pump.
So as you can see, we have a pretty bad case of the old diesel bug. Because we keep our fuel tanks full as much as possible, we only really began to pick up sludge when we ran the fuel right down in Indonesia, where we did a ton of motoring and fuel was not readily available in the areas we were cruising. So as the tank level came down, the fuel started sloshing around on the bottom a lot more, and we started to see sludge in the bottom of our ray core filter. In other words, when a tank is almost full, there is very little movement of fuel at the bottom of the tank, and the bugs continue to multiply without us even knowing it.
Okay, so that is the inboard side of the tank vacuumed. It got all the big parts out. It was actually quite surprising how easy it was to suck off, but there is a little bit of hard, clumpy stuff in there. I'll get a brush of some sort, maybe throw a bit of diesel in there and slosh it around, give it another vacuum. But that put a really good dent in it. It's looking good.
So the inspection hatch that we cut into the tank was just big enough for me to reach my arm in and scrub every corner of the tank. It should be illegal for anyone to install a fuel tank with no inspection hatch in it, no matter what it's made out of. Fuel is a critical element of any boat, and the condition of it should be able to be readily inspected. I know Brian from Delos and a few others have had trouble sealing their tank lids, so we still have to see if my idea of how to seal it is going to actually work or not. The spray I had bought was working a treat, but I was still only halfway through the job and had the whole other half of the tank to do next.
Alright, got the tank cleaned up pretty nicely, but we found probably a worse problem than the diesel boat itself. The bottom of the tank is badly pitted. There's one just on the forward side that I don't even know how it's not leaking yet. This aluminium tank is only about 3 mil. This plank that we got made is 4 mil, and that's thicker than the tank. So it's a big problem because we can't get the tank out. It looks to me with these big brackets on the wall that the tank sort of went in, slid backwards into its position, and then the rest of the cabin came down in front of it. So we need to put some sort of barrier on the bottom of this tank that's going to stick to aluminium. Not a lot of things like to stick to aluminium or aluminum. So gonna need to do some research. I would imagine some sort of epoxy product, but getting in there and sanding and primering and etching isn't going to be easy at all. So you could look at it like this. You could look at the diesel bug situation being a blessing in disguise, because without that we may not, no, we definitely wouldn't have opened up this tank. If we hadn't opened up this tank, it would have leaked sooner or later. I'm talking months. That's how thin that one pit hole is.
Somewhere across the Indian Ocean.
Probably halfway to this bloody Madagascar or something. And we'd have fuel leaking into the bilge with no way to get at the bottom of the tank, no way to get the tank out, and probably no way to transfer fuel either. So thank you, diesel bugs. You've saved us a horrible nightmare, ironically. Because of the diesel bug, we're doing a transfer system, a polishing system of cleaning this tank out, and now we're going to put a new floor on it because it's really bad. It was hard to film. Don't know if you can see it, but some of those pits were thousandths of an inch away from busting through the bottom of the tank. If this tank could come out, even if it could come up to here, we could spin it and weld a new bottom onto the tank. The sides of the tank look absolutely perfect still. Not even a dimple in it. But the floor, obviously where some water has been sitting, is badly pitted. What do you reckon, Joe?
Don't know what to say. You've been through so much that this is just...
Just another day at the office around here. Shit. What do you think, an epoxy skin of some sort?
Would be the easiest way. Whether it's the best way, I'm not sure.
We'll have to do some homework. But anyway, I would like to sleep in here tonight because this is my cabin. So we put 4 holes in there already as a bit of a test. But I think we're just going to drill and tap a few more just to seal this up so that I'm not sleeping in diesel fumes all night.
So my idea for how to seal the tank involves fuel grade thread sealant, fiber washers, nylon washers, and a nitrile rubber gasket that I was super lucky to buy off Julio, who I told you about earlier. All of the stores in Langkawi only sell neoprene rubber, which is not compatible with fuel. I wasn't going to pressure test the system just yet though, so Chose and I put a few bolts in just to stop the fumes from coming out. Meanwhile, back under the boat, the Yacht Supply Malaysia boys were doing an awesome job fairing under the sugar scoops, which meant we had to get more glassing done so that they had more work to move on to. I started to drop the portside rudder, which also had water in it. As I mentioned before, the rudder stock is made completely out of fiberglass, which this tiller arm is connected to with 4 bolts. These bolts were totally seized the first time I took them off, but now they come apart nicely as I loaded them up with Tef gel, which stops the stainless bolts from corroding the threads of the aluminium tiller arm. The 2 tiller arms are connected by a tie bar, and there is a pin through the rudder stock to enable the tiller arms to turn the rudders. There is also one more pin through a collar below that, which holds the rudder up, so once that's out, down she comes. I then did the same thing as the starboard side and cut the whole side of the rudder off to remove all of the wet foam inside. It was then time to do our final bit of fiberglassing on the hull, which the boys were cutting the glass for, which would mean that both hulls would be completely glassed in.
Okay, apart from the rudders, we are going to do our last bit of glassing, which is this spot under the engine room. The fiberglass was just turning up a little bit damp here, so we've had a bag around this and a dehumidifier for over a week, and now it's properly bone dry. So we're ready to glass this up with epoxy. We'll fill all the little imperfections and then load her up. Last bit of glass going on the hull. I'll do an update on the rest of the hull after this.
So we had quite a big void to fill, where we had found moisture sitting under the bulkhead of the engine room, so we were going to fill that with epoxy mixed with microblooms and silica. We also threw in some milled glass fibers for extra strength, and Uchu started filling the gap. We were then ready to wet out all of the fiberglass, but a couple of weeks ago we asked if any professionals could comment on whether the fiberglass should be laid up from largest to smallest or the other way round. I couldn't believe the number of comments for one way or the other, from people who have been in the industry for decades. I would say it was about 50-50, but I think the most compelling argument was in favour of going large to small to get the best bond and also keep all of the largest pieces intact when grinding it down afterwards. But that whole discussion came after we filmed this repair. So we went with our usual order of small to large, which I have no doubt is sufficient, especially when using epoxy instead of polyester. Look at how solid that is. With a bit of a scuff and some fairing, she'll be better than new.
Good morning guys. So we haven't filmed too much over the last week or so because all we've been doing is filling and fairing. So today we want to spray the top sides here. We got 4 repair areas. It's 3 cleats and a bit of damage on the bow there. We've got Mubin coming. So he is the local gel coat spray guy, and he's got this machine. It's like a spectrometer or something, and you hold it up against the hull and it'll tell you the color of the gel coat, and with that we're going to match the gel coat that we have here to the color of the boat. So we got some pigments and stuff that we're going to add, so he'll be arriving later today. So I just got a couple of last little spots to sand down. I'm just filling up little pinholes and stuff now. The area is really nice and flat. It's all sanded, looking really good, strong. So the key to all of this fairing, if you've never done it before, is to obviously use long boards and keep everything flat. So if you just go in there with a small block and 60 grit or something, you'll put a big dent in that area that you're sanding. So we've been using these long boards to keep the whole thing nice and level. The shoulders have gotten a workout, that's for sure, but it's the only way to do it properly. You could hit it with orbitals and stuff, but you're just going to create more work for yourself in the long run. So it's all been done by hand. Also, the best way to know if you've got a nice flat surface is to use your hands, because your eyes won't pick up some of these imperfections. It just won't. So we've learnt to really use our hands to feel any little bumps, humps, hollows, and fill from there. Your fingers can feel like a thousandth of an inch or something, but your eyes will not pick that up. So this final sand will just get all the little imperfections out, and then I'll tape it all up, protect the whole area here, and we should be good to spray this afternoon. Then tomorrow we're going to spray the whole perimeter of the boat basically. It's where the blisters were slightly coming above the water line. We had to knock back all that gel coat. Ironically, it's only about this much gel coat that's showing because there's a big sticker above that goes the length of the boat. It's been so much work to spray this much of the boat with gel coat. But while we're at it, we've repaired all of the transom here where like dinghies and other boats and stuff have come up and knocked the boat. So that takes a little bit more finesse, getting that nice rounded edge and stuff. But yeah, it's just been a full week of filling and fairing. Nothing too exciting, just time consuming. So the 5 of us made really, really good progress. So it'll be good to see some gel coat finally going onto the boat. And then the gel coat needs a lot of work to get all the orange peel effect out of it. So we want that flat and then glossy. So we're just working our way up the grades of sandpaper. So there'll be a lot of work involved there. And then we can just finish the hull. We've left a bit of a gap between the hull and the gel coat, so that we'll spray that first and then we'll bring the epoxy up, just up to the waterline, so that everything below the waterline has an epoxy barrier coat, and then everything above will just be gel coat. So yeah, pretty big day today, but it'll be good to get some gel coat happening. This stuff here has been a amazing product for the final fairing. It's a really light fairing compound, but it's already mixed with micro balloons, so we don't have to stand there mixing the micro balloons into polyester to make that filler. It comes ready to go. So all you do is drop some MEKP, the catalyst, inside that, and you're ready to fair it on. Again, it's just light fairing, so that's just been the final stages of the fairing process. Before that we were just using actual fiberglass, and then if it was just slightly deeper than what I want to use for the light fairing compound but doesn't really need a layer of fiberglass, I've used this structural repair putty which has milled fiberglass inside it. So that's been really good for some of the parts where I want a bit more strength. You have to add wax into that mix to get it to air dry, otherwise it'll stay tacky. So a bit of wax, MEKP hardener, and it sets really hard. As you guys know, we're partners with Total Boats, so I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to buy any of their products, and it helps us out. We get a little kickback for some of those purchases, so it's a way you can support this project if you like.
Okay guys, we're going to end the episode here so that we can have all of the gel coat color matching and spraying in one episode for you next week. So don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications bell if you're new here and want to continue to watch this boat transformation next week. Cheers guys.